The mountains above Jalisco were still wrapped in darkness. No sirens, no movement, nothing to suggest that the next 10 minutes would shake an entire country. Then, the helicopters dropped. Mexican special forces flooded the narrow roads leading into Dapalpa, a mountain town. Population, a few thousand, unknown to the most of the world, until now. The compound gates came down fast. Soldiers in full tactical kit moved in from every direction. Radio chatter was clipped and controlled. These operators had trained for this moment for months. Inside, gunmen opened fire immediately. The firefight was short. It was brutal. 4 cartel members went down at the scene. 3 Mexican soldiers were wounded. 2 others were taken into custody. And one man, the man the operation was built around, was hit. He was wounded. He was breathing. He was loaded onto a transport aircraft and flown toward Mexico City. He never made it. He died en route. His name was Nemesio Osguera Cervantes. The world knew him as El Mencho. And the moment news of his death spread, Mexico erupted. Within 3 hours, burning vehicles blocked highways across 9 states. Airports in Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta descended into chaos. Travelers sprinted through terminals. Airlines canceled flights. Hotels locked their doors. The United States Embassy told American citizens in at least 6 Mexican states to shelter in place immediately. The most wanted drug trafficker on the planet was dead, and his organization wanted the entire country to feel it. If you're still watching, tap like right now. What this man built and what happens next is something most people will never fully understand. To understand what happened Sunday morning, you need to understand the man who made it necessary. Nemesio Osega Cervantes was born in 1966 in the rural western state of Michoacán. His early years are mostly shadows. Records show he worked as a police officer. He farmed avocados, a quiet life on paper. But in the late 1980s, he crossed illegally into the United States. He settled in California. He got into trafficking. He got caught. He was charged with heroin distribution and deported back to Mexico. He came back. In 1992, American authorities arrested him again on narcotics charges. He served 3 years in federal prison. He was released. He was deported a second time. At that point, most people would have reconsidered their path. El Mencho did not reconsider. He accelerated. Back in Mexico, he embedded himself into existing trafficking networks. He studied how they operated. He identified their weaknesses, and he waited for an opening. That opening came in 2010. When Mexican security forces took down Ignacio Coronel, a powerful Sinaloa cartel lieutenant, his network collapsed into competing factions. El Mencho saw a vacuum. He moved into it. By 2011, he and a tight circle of associates had founded what they called the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, named for the western state where they planted their flag, known by its initials, CJNG. From day one, CJNG operated by different rules. Most cartels relied on corruption and intimidation. CJNG did that too, but they layered something on top of it that changed the game entirely: military capability. They recruited former soldiers, former police officers, people who understood tactics, weapons, and command structure. They acquired rocket-propelled grenade launchers, armored vehicles, encrypted communications. They built weaponized drones designed to drop explosive payloads on rivals and on government forces alike.
They placed mines on rural roads to slow military pursuit. They were not a drug trafficking organization that occasionally used violence. They were a private army that happened to traffic drugs.
Comment exposed if you think what this cartel was capable of should have been front-page news years ago. In April 2015, CJNG operatives ambushed a convoy of state police officers in Jalisco. 15 officers were killed. 5 more were wounded. Gunmen blocked the road with burning trucks, then opened up with machine guns and grenade launchers. It was the deadliest single attack on Mexican law enforcement in the modern era. 1 month later, they did something no cartel had ever done before. A Mexican military helicopter was pursuing a convoy believed to be transporting El Mencho himself. The helicopter was flying low, scanning the terrain below. One of the cartel's ground teams lined up the shot. They fired a rocket-propelled grenade. The helicopter went down. 9 law enforcement officers were killed. 1 aircraft destroyed by organized crime. It had never happened before in the Mexican drug war. The government was stunned. President Enrique Peña Nieto made a public vow. CJNG would be dismantled. El Mencho would be captured. Resources would flow toward this specific fight. Then El Chapo escaped from prison for the second time in July 2015, and the government's attention fractured. El Mencho used that distraction to consolidate everything. As CJNG expanded across Mexico, El Mencho's organization moved into a product that would redefine the American drug crisis: fentanyl, a synthetic opioid between 50 and 100 times more potent than morphine. 2 milligrams, less than a few grains of salt, is enough to kill. CJNG became one of the primary pipelines pushing fentanyl into American cities, suburbs, and rural towns. The operation had family at its center. El Mencho's own son, Ruben Osguera Gonzalez, known as El Menchito, was deeply embedded in the production side. Evidence introduced at his American trial showed that as early as 2013, he was planning to flood the U.S. market with counterfeit prescription pills laced with fentanyl. He called it an empire. He intended to build it at scale. They did. At the peak of the crisis, more than 110,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in a single year. The majority of those deaths involved synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, primarily from cartels like this one. Families across the country lost people they loved to pills that looked exactly like legitimate medication and contained doses capable of stopping a heart. El Menchito was extradited to the United States in 2020. In September 2024, a jury convicted him on drug trafficking and weapons charges. In March 2025, a federal judge sentenced him to life in prison plus 30 years. He was ordered to forfeit more than $6 billion. Prosecutors said he had supervised the trafficking of more than 50 metric tons of cocaine, that his labs had produced more than 1,000 metric tons of methamphetamine, that he had personally ordered the murders of more than 100 individuals. His father remained a free man.
If this is reaching you, hit like. This story needs to travel further than the algorithm wants it to.
For more than a decade, El Mencho was everywhere and nowhere. He controlled one of the most powerful criminal organizations on Earth. He oversaw operations in at least 21 of Mexico's 32 states. The DEA assessed CJNG had a presence in all 50 American states. The cartel had extended its reach into Europe, Asia, and across Latin America. and yet no one could find him. All photographs of El Mencho were years old. Some were decades old. He rarely appeared in the same place twice. His security apparatus was reported to include more than 100 people whose sole purpose was to detect and neutralize surveillance. They set up ambushes against anyone who got too close. The United States put a bounty on his head, then raised it again. Eventually, it reached $15 million. He still didn't surface. In June 2020, CJNG gunmen attacked Mexico City's police chief, Omar Garcia Harfuch, with grenades and high-powered rifles in an upscale neighborhood. Garcia Harfuch was wounded. 3 others were killed. The message was unmistakable. The cartel could reach into the capital itself in broad daylight in one of the wealthiest districts in the country. Garcia Harfuch recovered. He later became Mexico's Federal Secretary of Security, and he never forgot the attack.
The Trump administration, which returned to power in January 2025, had made cartel dismantlement a cornerstone of its foreign policy. In February 2025, CJNG was formally designated a foreign terrorist organization, the same legal classification applied to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Anyone providing material support to the cartel faced terrorism charges under U.S. federal law. In January 2026, American and Mexican officials stood up a joint interagency task force. Its mandate was specific. Its target was specific. Sunday, February 22, 2026, mountain town of Tapalpa, Jalisco State. Mexican special forces moved in before sunrise, acting on intelligence developed by that joint task force over weeks. The raid was coordinated. The timing was precise. Cartel guards opened fire the moment troops breached the perimeter. 4 CJNG fighters were killed. 2 were taken alive. 3 Mexican soldiers were wounded but survived. El Mencho was hit. He was captured alive, wounded, breathing, but captured. Authorities seized armored vehicles, rocket launchers capable of bringing down aircraft. He was transported by air toward Mexico City for medical treatment and processing. He died before the plane landed. Mexico's Defense Ministry confirmed the outcome. United States Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau called El Mencho one of the most ruthless and destructive criminal figures in modern history. He described the operation as a major development, not just for Mexico and the United States, but for the entire hemisphere.
The celebrations barely had time to form before Mexico's highways started burning. Within hours of the announcement, suspected CJNG members launched coordinated disruptions across the country. Buses and semi-trucks were hijacked, set on fire, and used to barricade major roads. The chaos spread across 9 states. 21 highways were blocked. Schools were shut down. Jalisco's governor declared a statewide emergency and suspended all public transportation. At Guadalajara International Airport, passengers ran. At Puerto Vallarta's airport, airline staff physically escorted tourists across the tarmac. American Airlines, United, Delta, Air Canada, Aeromexico all canceled or suspended service to the region. The U.S. Embassy's shelter-in-place order covered Jalisco, Michoacán, Guerrero, Tamaulipas, Nuevo León, and more. American tourist Travis Dagan told reporters he woke up thinking it was construction outside his hotel. It wasn't construction. Type justice below if this has been a long time coming. Security experts have debated the so-called kingpin strategy for years. The theory is straightforward. Remove the head, the body collapses. The reality is often more complicated. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has publicly questioned the approach. She has warned that eliminating cartel leaders can shatter organizations into warring factions, triggering new waves of violence rather than suppressing them. Her predecessors said the same things. When El Chapo was captured in 2014 and again in 2016,
The Sinaloa cartel didn't disappear, it fractured, and fracturing often means more bloodshed, not less. Now it's CJNG facing that same transition. El Mencho's wife, considered the cartel's chief financial architect, was arrested in 2021. His son is serving life in a U.S. federal prison. His brothers-in-law, who ran the cartel's money operations, have been arrested or extradited. His stepson, Juan Carlos Valencia Gonzalez, carries a $5 million American bounty. The organization still exists, the infrastructure still exists, the money still exists. Whether any successor can command the loyalty that El Mencho inspired through 2 decades of fear, that question has no answer yet. What is clear is this: the fentanyl crisis, while showing early signs of a decline, overdose deaths dropped by roughly 27% in 2024, according to the CDC, has not ended. Approximately 80,000 Americans died from overdoses that year, more than 140 per day. The market that made CJNG one of the wealthiest criminal enterprises in history still exists, and that market is American. In Puerto Vallarta, tourists emerged from their hotel rooms as the smoke began to clear over the bay. In Guadalajara, soldiers stood watch beside the charred remains of vehicles that cartels had used as a statement. In Washington, officials marked a tactical victory. Somewhere in Mexico, the calculations had already begun. El Mencho built this over nearly 2 decades. He turned a regional operation into a global trafficking network. His death ends his chapter. The book is still open.
Hit like so this story gets past the algorithm and reaches people who need to understand what's happening. Comment what you think comes next. Does CJNG collapse or does it adapt? Share this with someone who thinks the drug war is someone else's problem. And subscribe, because what happens in the next 30 days in Mexico will matter to every American, whether they know it or not. This is not the end of the story.